welcome to the Observer's talk show. Let's talk about EU. Joining me here today to discuss the topic of EU enlargement is Jelko Kacin, Slovenian member of the European Parliament representing ALDE, the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, and Mr Charles Tannock, British member of the European Parliament representing the ECR, the European Conservatives and Reformists. You're all very welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. So without further ado, let's talk about EU. Article 49 of the Maastricht Treaty says that any European state that respects the principles of liberty, democracy, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law may apply to join the European Union. Croatia appears to be next up to join the bloc, but what about the rest of South East Europe? Bearing in mind this week's EU Western Balkans conference in Sarajevo, I'd like to ask my MEPs what they think. So first I'm going to start with you. You're the chair at the moment of the delegation to South East Europe. So can you tell us a bit now about the progress of the integration of the Western Balkans?
Well, usually people are talking about the enlargement, but enlargement is not possible until the accession process is finished. That's why I need to say at the beginning that every individual state needs to progress as fast as possible, and they are creating their own dynamism. So what I would advise would be more ambitious program to speed up the process of the accession and to qualify themselves. I'm coming from Slovenia, so we were once former Yugoslavia. Croatia is our neighbor, and we would appreciate very much to identify as soon as possible next candidate country that would have a date to start negotiations. Macedonia is there waiting for 5 years, being a candidate country without negotiations, without a date, and this is a very frustrating situation.
Absolutely. And would you agree, Mr Tannock? Do you think that the Western Balkans need to join together first before they can enter the European Union, or what's?
No, I don't agree with that. No, every country has to be judged on its own merits. But of course, the danger is if one joins before the other, then they tend to use their veto to stop the other one joining because of unsettled scores or bilateral disputes. We've seen that with Slovenia now, with Croatia, because of the border disputes.
And coming to Slovenia, there's a vote there on Sunday. How do you think that will go?
Well, I hope so. We want to be a part of a solution, so we are campaigning in favour. But at the end of the day, we need to wait until the final outcome will be available. But as it seems now, the policy is saying that there is a slight majority in favour, so we will be able to overcome the present situation. And I believe that it would be a very good guideline for all the other countries in the region to follow our path.
The European Commission adopted a proposal recently that applies to Albania and Bosnia and their free movement with biometric passports in Europe. So I would like to ask you, Mr Kazin, about the topic, but before I do so, I just want to show you a little clip of a documentary that's been made by a Romanian journalist and a Serb filmmaker called Where Europe Ends.
Ui, Doamne, moare omul, moare omul!
This is where the European Union officially ends, with the splinter states of the former Soviet Union. These people cannot travel anywhere in Europe without visas. None of the great European freedoms applies to them. They might well belong to Europe geographically, but politically they're out.
So the European Commission adopted a proposal last week specifically about Albania and Bosnia and the idea of that they can travel through the Schengen without a visa. Has that been voted on yet, or?
No, I mean, it's not my committee. That's a Justice and Home Affairs, although we have an opinion in the Foreign Affairs Committee. But obviously, ultimately, the whole of the Western Balkans should have visa-free travel. After all, that's what they enjoyed when they were Yugoslavia. So we're just going back to what it was like before. But obviously, there's also been far more problems in terms of biometric passports, in terms of international organised crime, corruption and so on, for some of the countries more than the others. And there wasn't enough confidence in the integrity of the passport system for those two countries. So they've been held back. But Montenegro, Macedonia, have got the visa facilitation already in place. So they'll be judged on their own merits. But the wider issue, where does Europe end, of course, is a very vexed question, which I don't think anybody can ever really come to a conclusive argument, because there are many different definitions of what Europe is, a geographical, a cultural, a political, and so on.
And what about the economic situation? I mean, the whole financial crisis is affecting the whole entry of the Western Balkans and slowing it down. I mean,
definitely, they have additional problems. As it was just said, there were 5 countries who were on the list for visa liberalization. Unfortunately, 2 of them failed, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Albania. And we hope that they will be able to prove themselves as soon as possible to give them a visa-free regime as well. But on the other hand, we have Turkey, who is a candidate country. They don't have a visa-free regime for the EU for the time being. And you have asked something about the economic situation. Turkey is doing extremely well, but the other countries are really suffering because there are additional dividing lines between them. They still don't understand that when we talk about European Union, it is very much about business. It's very much about economy. So they need to develop much better relations with neighboring countries to create better, bigger domestic markets, to attract investors, to bring investments into their countries, to create new jobs. So to improve the political atmosphere among neighbors is something what is extremely needed. But on the other hand, we have a state. I'm in charge of Serbia, being rapporteur for Serbia, that does not recognize a neighbor of Kosovo. So when you are asking about the neighborhood relations and improving, when somebody denies that there is a neighbor next to them, it is additional difficulty that we need to overcome.
Well, that's slightly unfair, of course, because there are several other member states who don't recognise Kosovan independence, and half the UN doesn't. The Kosovan question is a real problem because, in my view...
what is the future of Kosovo? What's
well, that's a whole debate, frankly. And
that's another debate.
That's another very complicated debate because at the moment Kosovo is in limbo internationally because not everybody recognises it. And until every member state of the EU recognises it, it can't even start to become a candidate because, by definition, there has to be a common position on the recognition of an acceding country. So we have created a real headache in the Western Balkans by the issue of Kosovo. There's no question about it.
And to make the situation worse, Serbia is having now a visa-free regime, but Kosovo didn't get anything yet. There is no proposal yet, so we are waiting that the Commission would bring the proposals to create a path for them to finally get a visa-free regime.
And the Commissioner for Enlargement, Stefan Füle, is actually in Sarajevo today celebrating the EU summit between the European Union and the Western Balkans, but only 7 out of the 27 foreign affairs ministers are there. Do you think it will be a success, this meeting?
Well, that's disappointing because I think the Western Balkans are a major challenge in terms of foreign policy. Enlargement is a big issue, and the Western Balkans clearly are they are the imminent candidates which should join first. I mean, the only exception might be Iceland if it gets through. But other than Iceland, it's obvious that the next few countries have to be the Western Balkans because Turkey looks quite a long way off, in my view, and perhaps even further off now after what's happened in the Mediterranean.
You think in 2015, maybe, possibly?
Well, I don't want to talk about dates. What is important concerning this Sarajevo conference is that all the ministers coming from Western Balkan countries are there, finally. There are Serbian and Kosovo ministers sitting together, and this is a step forward. And the Turkish foreign minister is there as well. Without his presence, these 2 ministers would not appear there. So we cannot expect too much, but at least to sit around the same table, to manifest that there is a readiness to make progress. This is something what we need to appreciate. And I believe that it is a success.
It's quite difficult to get from one of the countries to the other. It's often easier to fly to London or Brussels from some of the countries and to go to the neighbouring country because the old days of Yugoslavia, the network for railways and what have you and flights was more integrated, but since then they've broken that all down, so they do need to integrate regionally as well. I agree entirely with that.
So just to wrap it up there, do we have a United States of Europe on our way or a Europe of the nations?
Well, I sincerely hope a Europe of the nations because I think that if we push the integration thing too far, the whole thing will end in tears, personally.
OK. Well, thank you very much for joining me here today and thank you very much for watching. As the reports continue to be published and the political debate goes on, I would like to hear your opinion on whether the Western Balkans should enter the EU or not. Please leave a comment underneath this video or email us at video@euobserver.com. I'd like to remind you as well, if you are watching from Brussels and you would like to hear more on the topic, the euobserver.com will be hosting a conference here on the topic on the 10th of June, so do sign up. But from me and my guests, thank you and take care.